What's up everybody, it's Robin Gaming here. So Uncharted The Lost Legacy has now been out for a good 2 weeks. I hope that by now most of you have finally beaten it. Although, for spoiler reasons, I will make sure not to really, spoil anything for those of you who haven't yet, I guess. But I've pretty much been bombarded with the question of, well, Robin, now that you have beaten the game a couple times, and it's been out for, these 2 weeks, where would you personally rank it among the other games in the series? So that's what I'm gonna try and do in this video. Now, I find it very important to say, first of all, that before we actually get into this, I of course, as a big fan of the series, I love all of them pretty much for, for different reasons, right? Like, all of them do certain things well, but of course, with a comparison like this, you're always gonna point out the negatives and the positives, and that way, it may sometimes appear maybe like, you don't like a certain game or whatever, but I like them all. There is only, I think, like, I would say all of them are pretty much to be considered great in my personal opinion. There is only one Uncharted game I can think of that I would call just good, and that's Uncharted Golden Abyss. That's the only Uncharted game made not by Naughty Dog. So, for context reasons, let's actually, quickly get back and talk about what my previous order used to be. Right after Uncharted 4 came out, I already made a video about that. Yeah, Golden Abyss was pretty much at the last spot, right, all the way down on the list, because while still being a good game, I don't necessarily think that game was a must-have to Uncharted fans. I just thought it was a cool game to pick up if you own the Vita, but in almost every single way, from the story to the gameplay to the graphics, of course, and the set pieces and action moments, characters, it felt like a little bit of a step back. Once again, still a good game, just not as good as any of the Naughty Dog Uncharted games. After that, to me, always been kind of a controversial one. Some people look at it as a great game, although, and one of the best ones, although I think the majority does agree, and the general consensus is that this is like one of the most disappointing, technically, Uncharted games, though still great, and that's Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. Yeah, there are some parts I love about that game. I love the multiplayer, I love what they did with the relationship between Drake and Sully, the flashback moments, of course, some of the set pieces are by far the most over the top in the game, which is cool in its own way. But with Uncharted 3, I always had a bit too many personal, reasons why it disappointed me. There were a couple of aspects of it that I didn't like, especially the pacing. I mean, the pacing in the first half of that game is just by far the worst in the Uncharted series in general, in my personal opinion. Yeah, I also thought that, of course, the game kept jumping from location to location to the point where the story at times didn't even really make much sense anymore, and the motivations why these characters were going to locations wasn't always worked out very well. Also contained some plot holes and stuff. The villains, Marlo and Talbot, to me were the weakest. So, there's a couple of other nitpicky things I could mention, like I didn't like the gun combat in it, the aim mechanics and stuff, the enemy AI that seemed to have taken even more of a step backwards, although it's never been too great in Uncharted games and in Naughty Dog games in general. But yeah, here especially sometimes they were just walking away from you, acting all, drunk, like the last thing they had in their mind was actually trying to kill you. It was crazy in that game. But yeah, anyway, to me Uncharted 3 was always, pretty much the most disappointing, technically, Naughty Dog Uncharted game. After that, I put Uncharted 1, because while many people will still always point out the critiques with Uncharted 1, and they're definitely there, there isn't a lot of variety in the environments, yeah, because it's just in a jungle, right, or the gun combat can sometimes be a little repetitive. It's wave after wave of enemies, but what I really like in Uncharted 1 is the fact, well, it's multiple reasons. It's the beginning of the story for Drake, Sully, and Elena, and that's great. They had some awesome moments together in that game. I also think that some of the villains were great. Eddie Raja, I have great memories of, and at the same time, something I've always really appreciated about Uncharted 1 is the fact that as a, just looking at the vibe of it, it felt really mysterious and very different, tonally speaking, compared to the other Uncharted games in the series. So I can really appreciate and respect what Uncharted 1 tried to do, and I do think it did that very well. It was a great start to the Uncharted franchise. Now, as far as my favorite goes, of course, I was always choosing between Uncharted 2 and 4. That kind of feels like picking between your parents, you both love them for different reasons once again. But ultimately what I have settled on is that I think Uncharted 4 is, objectively speaking, the best Uncharted game in the series. The gun combat is by far the most satisfying. There's more of a mix, there's more platforming in there. It's not too much fighting that you do in the game as well. Of course, the environments are great. The story by far far is the best in the entire series. The way they ended off Drake's story, the way they brought that full circle into a close was absolutely amazingly done. Many different layers to the story as well, which Uncharted games previously never really had. So yeah, you know, I really love the way they tackled the ending of Drake's story. At the same time, my few flaws that I have with Uncharted 4 mainly come down to the pacing. You know, there's a couple of areas, Scotland, the first chapter of Madagascar, at sea maybe in the young Drake parts, that especially replaying it, it's just a bit too slow for my taste, and therefore I don't always have as much fun playing through Uncharted 4 again, you know what I mean? Ultimately, to me, Uncharted 2 is the pinnacle of the franchise, simply for the fact that, yeah, even looking back at it now, yes, you could say that the gun combat is not as satisfying anymore compared to 4, and of course the graphics aren't as good, but it was simply the ultimate Uncharted package. When it came out, it left such a huge impact on not just me, but the entire gaming industry, you know? The pacing in it is absolutely flawless, I would say, almost. You know, it just felt like one big roller coaster ride the entire way through. Drake, Sully, and Elena had some of the best moments in the game. Chloe got introduced, who was a great character. Some of the villains were the best, Flynn and Lazarevich. And then the environments, you know, and the set pieces too, like the train and everything. But the environments from Nepal to, yeah, the train section, the monastery, Shambhala. It felt like one big journey all the way through. And Uncharted 2, to me, once again, will always remain to be my favorite and the pinnacle of the franchise to me personally, really. So now that I've talked for a good, like, you know, 5+ minutes about what my previous order used to be, let's actually put The Lost Legacy in there somewhere. Now, I find that kind of a hard thing to do because The Lost Legacy is a very different kind of experience from the other Uncharted games, simply for the fact that you play as Chloe, that this is about Chloe and Nadine. It's not so much about Drake, Sully, and Elena anymore, right? You don't have those characters in this game, so it feels like a different type of experience. I would say that the game in many ways does things better than most Uncharted games in the series. Hell, even Uncharted 4, you know, looking at it gameplay-wise, it pretty much takes Uncharted 4 systems and gameplay formula, but at the same time puts it into a little bit more of a tighter package, and it just never really, like, you know, it never has those slow moments. It is fun all the way through. That's what I really like about The Lost Legacy. There's a great variety in combat, in puzzles, in platforming. Yeah, at the same time, it doesn't really have those slow moments. You could argue maybe the open world part is like the low point of it, and yeah, I would say it pretty much is, but at the same time, it was still more fun to me than, for example, Madagascar and Uncharted 4. So I just had a lot of fun playing through The Lost Legacy all the way through. It also had some of the best moments in there, you know, some great ones that I'll definitely, you know, remember for a long time to come. I think ultimately, though, what kind of lets it down is, yeah, the fact that this is about Chloe and Nadine, so that story doesn't resonate with me as much as it did with Drake, Sully, and Elena. Asav as a villain had a little bit too less screen time, I guess, in the game, so he wasn't really developed perfectly well, but as a gameplay package, I really like it. And of course, I haven't even talked about the set pieces. I'm not gonna do that for spoiler reasons, but you all know how the game ends, and it's pretty fantastic, you know. So yeah, I love The Lost Legacy. I don't think it's as good as Uncharted 2 and 4 though. So where I would personally rank it is, and I'm still doing this kind of with like, it's really hard to do, but I think for personal reasons, story-wise, that's always what is still the most important to me, and I just have a very special feeling with Uncharted 1, you know what I mean? And so I think I would slightly still put Uncharted 1 even above The Lost Legacy, although with those two I could really like interchange them, yeah, perfectly fine without feeling too bad about it. But ultimately my order would probably be Uncharted 2, 4, then 1, then The Lost Legacy, although once again can really switch those up, and then 3 and Golden Abyss. So objectively speaking though, like I said, The Lost Legacy does things better than many games in the series, to me personally. But yeah, that's pretty much what my order would look like. So with that being said, this is also always quite a controversial thing, you know, sharing these lists, so make sure to share your own in the comments, but do realize, of course, with me here again, I love them all for different reasons, but this is the order that I would put them in. So with that being said, make sure to leave a quick like if you enjoyed the video to help support my channel, and then for now, thanks a lot for watching and hope to see you again next time.